Remember me! Remember me!
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
So on today's episode I'm taking a look at World Wonders. I didn't really have time to cover this around the Essen time. The demo table was a nightmare to get to, the publisher had pretty much no review copies for anybody but the big lot, and I just figured, you know what, it's coming out on retail soon, I'll just wait until 2024, I got enough games to cover, I'll wait and deal with it then. Since then it's had a decent amount of review coverage and a certain amount of buzz to go with it, so I don't know how well this video is going to do, but I definitely wanted to give my take on this because the premise sounded pretty cool. I tend to like these polyomino games where you're building up buildings and that on a map. Yes, we've seen it done to death a million times, but the mechanic is still good fun. But the idea that you were essentially like creating a ton of turn angst, and the fact that you could build these really chunky monument pieces all over your board and create something that's visually appealing and not just a bunch of Tetris pieces, that caught my attention. And being able to play it solo, there's a few things here that's working for it. 70 minutes on the box could be a solid one. But I've seen boxes lie in the past, and of course I'm not the one to buy into buzz and hype, so how did I find it?
Don't drop that, dear! Aww.
So in World Wonders, everybody has their own player board with 5 tracks on it. 3 of them are just generic resource tracks, whatever, the theme in this game is somewhat light. The population track is leveled up with these 3 resource tracks and it represents a game end timer. Get to the end of the track, you trigger the end game, or it ends in 10 rounds. Most of the time it will end in 10 rounds, frankly. But everybody has 7 gold on their board, tracked with a resource marker. And the idea is that players take it in turns to spend as much money as they want, up to the maximum of 7 as the round goes on various polyomino pieces or little towers or other road pieces that they can essentially put on their board. The pieces are laid out at the start of the round based on player count, and they come in various different Tetris sizes as you would expect. So there is a slightly bigger one here, there's T-shapes, there's tiny little squares, you know, there's all sorts of different shapes in here, and more so if you play this at 4 or 5. You can also buy things like the roads, which come in long roads, which can be bridges or tiny little roads. You can buy a tower, which is like another way of getting your roads to connect up with stuff, or you can even bid for first and second player marker. But players will take it in turns based on turn order to choose what it is they want to do. The rounds will continue until all players have passed or spent all their 7 money. But as well as building these tiles, you are able to build these giant monuments. Each one has their own big 3D piece that puts on your board. However, the monuments themselves have a criteria as to how they are placed on the board. So for example, if I take the Trojan horse here as a simple example, it takes up 2 green squares as per the card. It also must be placed next to a road and a H building. I believe the H is housing, I forget what they stand for, but they've all got a category basically. And so if you meet the criteria, you have to spend all remaining money on your board all the way up to 7. Effectively, this will be the last thing you do in the round, and you take the card, it's worth a victory point, maybe 2, might even level up some resource tracks, but then you take the piece, I know this isn't the Trojan horse, he's somewhere in there, and you place it on your board as per the restrictions on the card. All the things you place on your board have their own restrictions, so you must start at the bottom of your board, and then you can place a road from the pavement section, then you can place a building next to it, and then you need to either have buildings of the same color next to each other or build more roads, and of course, yep, you might be able to place the whopping great big monument there, and as time goes on, you basically create this really sort of pretty-esque looking landscape. There are natural resource spaces on the board that you can get more points if you don't cover them. There's some player objectives that you can go for that are basically public that you can score for, and other than that, that's kind of the way the game goes. You play through 10 repeated rounds, taking it in turns until everybody's passed, and then either when somebody hits the population track end, or more likely than not 10 rounds have passed, you total up the VP points and see who's the winner.
Of course!
So let's get rid of the obvious one first. Component-wise and like price for value, not bad here actually. Yeah, you're playing with a small board, but the Tetris pieces themselves have got a decent amount of colour variation and some nice detail on them, even though you're not really going to be looking that closely at them. But it does make it pop with a lot of colour. But it's gotta be said, these are phenomenal. Yeah, there are so many of these as well, and they're all unique pieces. I mean, 2 bags that it takes here, full of these giant monument wooden pieces. I mean, we've got pyramids, we've got Parthenons, we've got Great Wall of China, we've got aqueducts, we've got the Alexandria Lighthouse in here somewhere, we've got the Moai statues, and each one has their own restriction on how they go on the board, which is really cool, but we'll get onto that a bit more later. But yeah, it's really just very addictive to grab one of these monument pieces. Who cares about the victory point? I just want to place 3 giant pyramids on my board.
Did you see anything? No, sir. I didn't see you playing with your dolls again. Good!
And by the time you're done with the game, your map really does look not only unique to other players, but just looks cool in general. I really like that, even though this is a little bit of a gimmick, it's a really cool gimmick and just makes this stand out more from other Tetris Polyomino games where it is just a bunch of flat tiles. I mean, if you didn't have these monument pieces and all I did was use these coloured like tiles on the board, I guarantee you it wouldn't look anywhere near as cool once you got to the end. It really does look like a big, fully functioning pseudo city that you've got on the board.
Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it.
Rules are pretty straightforward as well. I mean, this is only this big because of the box, and 2 of these pages are just a bit of history, but you've got a little bit there for solo and advanced play, but for the main game, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that includes game setup. There's not a lot of rules in here, and frankly, once I was done, I didn't feel I needed to check too much in this game. Granted that there are 1 or 2 times where you might think, oh, hang on, how does that rule work? How's that rule work? And you might have to check it once or twice now and again, but it really isn't as common as some other games I've been playing lately. And also, the reference cards that you do get, well, reference tiles, aren't too bad themselves. Granted, you are going to need to explain this in context because there's no text on them, so it might be a little bit confusing at first, but they do a good job of just summarizing in icon detail what can be placed next to what and how much everything costs. It's a good little reminder. The only annoying thing is that they only give you 2 in the box. At least I think it's only 2. Maybe there's 1 I didn't take, but maybe there's 3 or so. In fact, why don't I check the rules and be certain, because I'm sure somebody's going to correct me on this. 3 player aids. So this game goes up to 5 players, and you only give me 3 of these aids, and they're double-sided.
Stupid! It's stupid!
I know this stuff costs money, but were you too tight just to give me 5 double-sided aids so I could give 1 per player? Why do publishers want to skimp out on something as simple as this when it literally would cost nothing just to put another 2 of these in the box? It's kind of odd, but it's a small blemish.
Spared no expense.
The turn angst in this game is on a whole different scale to what other games do. I mean, you will be there in like major tension. You'll be there practically having a heart attack waiting for other players to take their turn because everything is so limited in a round, and a lot of people could be gunning for the similar type of thing, especially when the monuments are there for everybody to see. So there'll be 3 of these out and we can see, okay, let's see, the Parthenon wants blue, they want brown, they want H's, they want M's, the marketplaces. So those ones are likely to be taken very early on. Well, where are you in turn order? If you're going last, goodbye with your chances of doing that. But if you're going first or second and it's there available, it's like, do I take it now? I really wanted a new set of roads so I could continue up here. But if I don't take that blue, someone's going to take the blue. Which one do I take? Oh, I don't know. And this is constant throughout the game. There is no point you get to rest on this front. And it's definitely one of the big highlights. And I like games where you're not necessarily like being interactive with other players, but you at least care what they're doing. It's kind of like what I say about Ark Nova. Yes, I don't go to another player's zoo and trample on their enclosures or something.
You're sick!
But, I still want to know what they're doing in case we're racing for the same stuff. You're going to take this card, you're going to do this first, when's your association card at level 5, that sort of thing is interesting there. Well, here it's the same thing. I don't necessarily care how you've built your map, but if I can tell that you're gunning for the Parthenon and so am I might need to think about that. I need to consider you at the table. It's not multiplayer solitaire, which is, again, something I seem to be seeing a lot of lately. You've also got a few unique paths to victory in this game. Your board gives you very much like the Knizia scoring, as I call it, points for having your resource tracks as high as they can be, because the lowest is what will score you points. So there's one aspect you can do. By leveling up your resource tracks heavily, you can up to the end of the population track. That will get you some more points and control the game timer. But there are other ways to score points too. Grabbing the monuments in in general can be worth 1 to 2 points apiece, but there's also an aspect to the board itself. The natural resource markers that you've got, if you can touch them but don't cover them, each one is worth a point. That's something not to be ignored. But another thing that can also be more lucrative than you think is the fact that you score a point for every tile if you completely surround it. Not necessarily by its own type, it can be anything that's just not an empty space. So even natural resources in the river in the middle course, or, well, river or lake, depending which side of the board you want to do. But I like that aspect as well, because it's not just a case of, oh, you've got a gun for those monuments, because you don't. You could ignore the monuments for a decent amount of the game, maybe get 1 or 2, and still do well if you focus on other aspects. I actually tried a game where I thought, you know what, maybe I'll get 1 or 2 monuments, but other than that I'm not going to worry, and I still did pretty well. I didn't win it, but I certainly did well compared to other players, and it was quite tight at the end. And that's another good thing, the scores can be pretty tight in this game. But I just spent the whole time basically building up and doing my utmost to be as efficient as possible with the spacing so that I could surround a lot of tiles with other tiles so that each one was scoring more points. I like the fact that there's just a few little ways to tweak your strategy in a game, and you are going to need to be flexible based on what tiles come out, although that can be a detriment. We'll get onto that in a minute. But yeah, I like the fact that it wasn't just one note and linear. So what was I inferring when I talked about that last topic there with the whole, I'll get onto that in a minute. Well, the luck aspect of this game, luck of the draw, is something we talk about with a lot of card games. There are times though where sometimes your strategy that you've gone for can be hosed just by what tiles come out. Because you might be thinking, right, well I'm going to grab that that monument here. It needs these ones. Okay, well I've kind of set myself up for it. That's great. Then you start the next round and no blue tiles come out. It can happen pretty easily. You might just have a round where the color you need is just non-existent. Maybe you've built up a decent amount of green, grey and purple and it's like, oh, that's okay. Right, okay, I'm going third or fourth. How many of those colors came out? 1. Oh, 1. Okay, and it's taken because somebody wants to build the Great Wall of China or something. It's like, well, great. So now I've got colors that I can't easily put down. Well, that makes life a bit hard. And sometimes you can get a little bit screwed over just by what tiles happen to come out, and there's not a lot you can really do about it.
Wait, my cheating unit malfunctioned.
So the box quotes 70 minutes.
You serious?
Yeah, if only it took 70 minutes all the time. I'm always a bit wary on game boxes where they just quote a single number for time. Every time I see that, I get worried about the game length because you know that they've just put a blanket figure down and not really told the truth or not really cared about game length. Because it's 1 to 5 players. It's turn order. Clearly, you can't play a 5-player game in the same amount of time you could play a solo game. It's just not physically possible. So clearly there's going to be a range here. But the range is not that close to 70 minutes a lot of the time. I mean, if you play this solo, you'll finish it in probably about 70 minutes. In fact, I'd say that's pretty accurate for a 1 to 2 player game at most. But even a 2-player game can go above 70 minutes. You play this with 4 or 5, you could be here for a good 90 minutes plus. I've seen games go on to 2 hours. The problem is that with turn order, you can't rush the game. There's no simultaneous play, so you've got to wait for everybody to take their turn. And if there's 5 of you, God help you, you are waiting a long time hoping that something will be there when it comes back round. But to get through 5 players worth of turns in a round can take a decent amount of time. And worse still, it's a polyomino game. What's the one thing you will see in every game with a polyomino setting? People taking the tile and seeing if it can fit in spaces there.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
Look, if you're lucky enough to play with a group of players who have perfect spatial awareness and can visualize that in their heads without any problems at all, then good for you. But in the real world, there are people, especially from the older crowd, who don't visualize spatial awareness very well.
I'm 37, I'm not old.
And once people start doing that in games, the game length just drags. And it's already got a fairly lengthy setup because you've got to get all the different Tetris pieces out of the bags because there's no decent insert in this box, and get everything set up, and then takedown can take a while as well because you've got to sort out all the tiles, get them back into their individual bags. This game easily exceeds 70 minutes. I was kind of hoping for something that would be a fairly shortish, not filler, but pretty shortish game. Trying to do this in 70 minutes with anything more than 2 players is a challenge in itself. and it does outstay its welcome by the time it hits 90 minutes plus, because I'm like, okay, we're rinse and repeating here, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, can we end it now?
Get on with it.
There's a solo mode in this game, and for the most part, it's good, because it's very quick. I mean, you will hit the 70-minute timer for the most part with this, and all you basically do is shuffle a bunch of cards, reveal one in the round, and it takes pieces that you want off the board. That's pretty much it. It really is that straightforward and fast. So really, I'd rather play this solo than 4 to 5 players any day. So why is this in the bad section? Well, again, and this is something I keep saying with publishers all the friggin' time, why do publishers get obsessed with this idea that all AIs have to be bone-crushingly difficult? Stop it! This game can be played on 2 modes, easy and hard. What is wrong with actually having an easy mode? Alright, if I just want a fluffy light game. Even on easy mode, this game is pretty hard. On hard mode, I don't think I've beaten it on hard mode. I'm not even entirely sure how you're supposed to beat it on hard.
Just give us a fucking chance, you son of a bitch!
It's mainly because it scores in a weird way. Literally, the scoring is the sum of your free resource tracks. Now, if your resource tracks are like as high as here, which is typical in most games, you're talking 30 plus points. That's a decent score, and trying to, beat it in that sense means that it really is kind of, a hard one to do. And in hard mode, you add up the victory points on all the monument cards as well. So the old Tomner's going to be scoring somewhere like in the 40-point mark plus, and it just feels like it's too hard at that point. You could probably tweak this and say maybe it's worth half of the, well actually no, that'd be too easy, but there'd be a way that you can tweak it. You could house rule it to make it easier difficulty, but yeah, it's like, you get the fun of doing the whole building up your thing, but then I almost just couldn't care less what the score is at the end, because I'm just like, yeah, the AI is just a bit too tough. So World Wonders is another polyomino game at the end of the day, but it does have some unique quirks to it, and mostly it stems from these monuments. These monuments basically make and break World Wonders. If you don't really care about this, then this isn't really going to give you anything new to the genre, but I like the idea of putting on these ones and trying to plan out for them and creating a really unique map setting. That is definitely a highlight of the game. Planning where these monuments can go, building your tiles around them, and having this really vibrant looking finished product once you are done. The turn angst being turned up to 11 again keeps the tension high and keeps me interested in what the other players are doing. Even though there's no major direct interaction, I'm definitely going to be constantly shouting at players for like, you took that bit, I wanted that. And that again creates a good feeling of play. What lets it down is the main fact that when you play this with a lot of players, you are increasing the downtime to insane lengths. You're also increasing the game length to a point where the 70-minute timer on the box is clearly lying to you at this point. I don't feel like I ever want to play this with 4 or 5 players because it will just drag out way too long. The game usually finishes in 10 rounds. Rarely does it finish because somebody maxes out the population track, which means you've got to go through the full length of the game, and just with 4 to 5 it's too much, so I'd rather play this with 1 to 3. Problem is with the solo mode is yes, it's simple to play, but it's a nightmare to beat the score, I find, and makes you play in a weird way, so you gotta tweak it to basically say screw the AI score and play it in your own way, and then it works better. But that's a minor blemish with the solo mode, and the time length is a problem. It just means I don't want to play this at high player counts. Otherwise though, the game is still pretty solid and I get a decent amount of fun from it, and the price point for this is not as high compared to a lot of other games we've seen recently where the component quality is nowhere near as good or durable as we see as this. This one is still a pretty solid hit overall. So I was contemplating between 2 ratings, but it's a low one, but I'm still going to give it an 8 out of 10. It's a great game, and the blemishes I have are either not too bad or can be fixed. The AI scoring thing, I do think that's a bummer, but I just beat my own score and then I just don't have to I can gloss over that small bit. The main problem I have with this game is the player scaling at 4 to 5 just takes the downtime and the player length, the game length, sorry, to a region where I'm not comfortable with it, for a game that's pretty light. But playing this with 2 or 3 players, even though I can't get 2-player games at the table very often, is very fun and very rewarding. The turn angst keeps you involved, it keeps you interested in what the other players are doing, and it's good fun. I particularly really like building up my map and having it look really cool at the end with these fantastic looking pieces. I mean, the game is produced well at a price point that's actually pretty fitting for something like this. It's not a £60 game giving me these funky wooden pieces. It's a lot cheaper, and I gotta give it props for that. Having a few different ways to play in terms of scoring, again, another good benefit. Do I go for a bunch of monuments? Do I go for surrounding my tiles? Am I going to care about the natural resources? Am I going to level up these tracks efficiently? There's different little ways that you can tweak it, but a lot of the fun of this game is just the fact that it is good fun to build up your map with these cool pieces in a cool way. That bit is just rewarding every single time, and it doesn't get boring other than when you play it with 4 to 5 and you're waiting for the downtime to get back to your turn or to, decide when the game's going to end. 4 to 5 players is not a recommendation I have for this. Certainly my rating goes down to probably a 6 out of 10 if you play at those high counts, but otherwise 1 to 3 players, you're in with a solid shout here. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Don't forget to check out the other content I've done on this channel. The top 100 is finished. I've done some Beyond the Base Game videos, and I've recently reviewed Last Light. So by all means, check out that review and see if it's if you agree or disagree with my thoughts on there. Also, don't forget to leave your comments down below. I want to know your thoughts on World Wonders. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are there bits I've not covered? By all means, let's know your thoughts and I'll be interested to read them. Until next time, regardless of whether you're going to stand a chance to build the whatever this is, it's still only a game. Bye for now.